forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March. For the fans who love the crunch of the pads, prefer a dunk, and expect nothing but the best. It's Bigger Ten. Here's Steve Deace.
Greetings. Welcome to this week's episode of Bigger Ten, talking all things Big Ten. I am Steve Deace. My co-host Aaron McIntire is here with me as well. Good to see you, brother. How are you?
Doing well. How about yourself?
Could be a little better, but I could be a lot worse. Of course, my mood for the foreseeable future could ultimately be determined here in the next few weeks as college football makes its final determination, likely at the end of this month or early in August, determining whether or not we will have a season. I am still very confident there will be some semblance of a season. But I am also very confident, Aaron, that this may look unlike any season, maybe any era of college football has seen since World War II, when you had, players coming and going from the military, teams like Iowa pre-flight.
I was about to say Iowa pre-flight.
Yeah. I mean, where sometimes on a given Saturday, you didn't know who your quarterback was because you weren't sure if he was, fighting, in the Italians in North Africa or not, right?
Right.
So the pandemic has set the world on its ear, but particularly the American sports world. Now, they are playing sports all over the world. You know this because you're like betting on every sport in the world right now, right?
Yeah, East Eurasian hacky sack is probably one of my best sports right now.
No, but in all seriousness, dude, you were getting down on Spanish basketball,
Bundesliga basketball. Right now, Israeli basketball as well, Israel Super League.
You did any Premier League soccer in the UK? Because that's been up for a few weeks.
I've backed off of the Euro League a little bit and gone to Premier League because it's a little bit easier to handicap at this point. But once the NBA starts back up, I'm all over that again.
It's interesting. Spain, next to Italy, Spain had, of all the Western countries, was the hardest hit by the pandemic. Yet you were betting on their championship basketball tournament.
Yeah, a
few weeks ago.
You see this? I've got the score for the Atalanta, I think that's how you say it, game this afternoon. That's Italian soccer. So there's
all right.
There's
so
that.
Italy, Spain.
Yep.
Which both of those countries make New York City look like Disneyland, right? What they went through.
Yep.
They're playing sports right now, and we are. How are we going to do this? How are we going to possibly pull this off? Right? In the end, I think they will figure out a way to pull it off. Why? Because they need to. Because the news today that Stanford University has cut 11 sports where it has won 20 national championships. Every university is going to be doing that and more if they don't have a football season. Okay? Plus, it is safe to play. These other nations are proving that it is safe to play. But that doesn't mean, though, it can be business as usual, right? Packed stands, travel all over the country. That's one issue that we do have in the United States they don't have in a place like a Spain or in Italy, where the entire country isn't even the size of a Texas, right? Let alone, cross-continental travel. So I thought, based on a couple of things I have read recently, this is from both of them that cover Michigan. The Wolverine is with the Rivals.com network, and then Wolverine Digest, which is with Sports Illustrated's network, have each talked to some insiders at the University of Michigan. I think we would both agree they're fairly well connected in Big Ten circles over there in Ann Arbor, right? And this is what we're going to discuss, the 5 ways the upcoming college football season may be impacted by coronavirus are what people are hearing in Ann Arbor from around the Big Ten and the college football world. Are you ready to go?
Yep.
All right, so these are the top 5 ways. Let's begin with number 1. We're going to be seeing some games canceled and schools skipped. I think you will see the Big Ten play either an all-conference schedule or strictly a regional schedule. The Michigan-Washington game to open the season, I've been saying that for weeks, is not going to happen. The athletic director at Washington actually came out and said it yesterday and said it looks like they're going to try to schedule Hawaii instead and then bring Michigan back in a couple of years to fill that to fulfill that contract. But I think you're going to see other games go away. I think Oregon and Ohio State may be the most hyped non-conference game of this season. Both of those teams are obviously going to be in everybody's top 10. I don't think that game's going to happen. I think Michigan State's probably not going to go play at BYU. I think unless it's within your own immediate footprint, getting on an airplane to play a football game, at least as far as the Big Ten is concerned, I don't see that happening. Unless it's to go to play at, say, Penn State. I think you're going to see some games get canceled, delayed, moved around, etc. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think this was, and I'm not saying this is the right thing, and I'm not endorsing this at all, but I think something like this was basically inevitable when we started canceling things, because for one reason or another, whether it's we need to be seen as if we're doing something or we really are just scared about this virus, things like this, and these are big deals. I mean, how many times during the off season, during March, April, May, some of the really dead doldrum horse latitudes, if you will, of the college football season, how often do you hear, a Big Ten team or SEC team has secured a 2031 and 2032 contract with some team from across the country? These are huge, huge events. Mm-hmm. And that's what a college football game is. It's an event. It's not just a game. It's an event. And they're planned years, if not a decade in advance. And there's lots of money surrounding these things as well. And so I think once you set the precedent that we're going to cancel the NCAA tournament, which you have said, you've been on the record before, that, that makes sense. Large indoor gatherings and things like that. Plus it was
March. We didn't know anything.
And we didn't know anything either as well. But now that we're here, I think it was inevitable that this was going to be affected somehow, and whether it's cutting down air travel or just not wanting to germinate to other parts of the country, distant far off lands, something like this I think was going to happen as well. Just skipping games and just going to a more local and regionalized schedule, and that's doable. That's doable for the big schools. It's the smaller schools. It's the group of five schools. It's the FCS
I don't think
schools.
Michigan will bring Arkansas State in to play a game this year either.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars for those smaller schools that they're just going to have to conjure out of thin air now. I mean, that's part of college football that I like. The MAC schools as well, they get paid money for going on the road. The MAC schools
are going to probably make a crap ton of money off of this.
Well, yes.
Everybody and their mom in our footprint is trying to call a MAC school probably right about now.
Right, but it's the schools from across the country. It's the smaller schools across the country that are going to get hurt. But MAC, in this particular instance as well, sure, MAC, they're in the same footprint as the Big Ten is, and so they're going to be, okay, I'll be your Huckleberry.
Maybe like an Arkansas State gets called by every SEC school now, right?
And so that's the hope anyway.
Now, when I mention air travel, it's not specifically about the air travel itself. I've actually traveled all over the country in the last month by air on a couple of different occasions. I think in some cases, you might be safer traveling in the air than in a bus. Why? Because you're in that space less time. That's not the issue. The issue is going across the country to areas where they may have different testing protocols. You don't know, the hotel situation, meaning the risk of exposure in those situations. There's just so many fewer things a Michigan can control in Seattle, Washington, compared to in its Big Ten footprint. There's so many things a Michigan State cannot control in Provo, Utah. An Ohio State cannot control in Eugene, Oregon. You know what I'm trying to say? And the fact that these are games that are also early in the year, just as you're testing out your own protocols internally for your own team. And we don't have a preseason in college football, right? That I can completely understand why Big Ten schools are going to probably be like, do we really want to have something go wrong in a non-conference game right now that could blow a hole in our whole season the rest of the way, right? And that's why I think you're going to see a lot of those non-conference games that are not drivable in a day go away within our footprint. Something else that Michigan circles are hearing about how the upcoming season, Aaron, could be altered. Michigan has, according to Sports Illustrated, has approached Ohio State, Indiana, and Michigan State about playing home and homes this year to compensate for holes in the schedule about where certain teams perhaps may decide not to play. I think we're going to get into that in the next topic, which of those schools it may be. But what do you think about the idea of home and homes within your region, within your division, within your conference? Those are conversations that Michigan is having right now.
I honestly like this idea. I really do. With Iowa, though, with my team, of course, not totally sure. I would still assume that the Iowa State rivalry, the big in-state rivalry here, I assume that would still be played.
Iowa State Athletic Director Jamie Pollard will drive the Cyclones to Kinnick Stadium himself.
Yeah, yes. I assume that's still being played, but I'm not so certain, and again, we might get into this in the next topic, not so certain about a school like Minnesota. I would love to have a home and home with Minnesota this year, but I'm not even sure if they're going to be playing a home and home with Wisconsin. Yeah, I'd love to get, I freaking hate having to wait a year to get another crack at those guys. I'd love to play a home and home, and that's not a very long trip. It's really not. From Iowa City
I've got the
to
opposite.
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin isn't beating you down the way Ohio State has beaten me down, because I'm thinking about the only damn thing worse in this world than getting destroyed by Ohio State every year is having it happen twice.
But I see it the other way. You've got an opportunity to beat them twice after losing it to them for a decade. I guess maybe I don't have the same amount of PTSD that you do, but
yes.
I kind of like
you
this
see
idea.
Chicken salad, I just see chicken.
Yeah. And Iowa has Northern Iowa, an FCS team here in state on their schedule this year. So I'm guessing like the Iowa State and Northern Iowa games are not going to be canceled. I can't remember off the top of my head who else they're playing as well. I think it's some MAC team or who they had scheduled anyway. But if it even came down to having to play an out of conference home and home with Iowa State, sign me up for that. That'd be a whole heck of a lot of fun. Play them the first week of the season and playing the last week of the season.
Yeah.
Can you imagine how awesome that would be?
I remember the Iowa State game, and it was moved to the end of the year for 9/11, and that atmosphere was insane. And the game went down to the wire. It was a lot of fun as well. All right, now we come the other options here are intriguing, okay, and worthy of debate. This one though is where we get into controversy. Michigan is hearing that there could be 4 or 5 Big Ten schools that either don't want to play or elect not to play this fall. But the problem is they're all afraid of being the first one because of the PR hit they're going to hit, number one, or they're going to take, number one. But number two, this goes down as a self-imposed death penalty in a way. Your players would be immediately eligible to leave and transfer. It would hurt your recruiting effort because you can't really say, well, we guarantee we're going to play next year. Because again, I know I've said this in other venues, maybe never here on Bigger 10. We have never, ever found, we've been studying coronaviruses for 70 years. We've never created a workable vaccine for a coronavirus in human history. The first SARS virus, this is the second one. The first one they spent over 12 years trying to find a vaccine for, and they never could. You can't tell your recruits right now. See, once you cancel a season once and other teams play, it gets harder to convince them you won't do it again because you can't sit here and tell your recruiting class that is going to sign later this year. You can't assure them you're playing next year then either if we don't have a vaccine by then or ever. And so there's several schools in our league that are kind of hovering around this. I am confident I know, based on some conversations I've had, who 3 of these schools are. And the first 2 probably won't be surprising at all. They're not really relevant in football right now, but they're also, particularly Rutgers in that tri-state area, in parts of the country that were among the hardest hit. Rutgers and Maryland are 2 of them, I believe. I strongly believe. And you can also understand why there might be other Big Ten schools. Like you can understand why Nebraska and Iowa. So you and I both live in Iowa. Mm-hmm. Iowa right now, maybe other than Georgia, is the most open state in the country, right? I can understand why the administration at the University of Iowa or a place at the University of Nebraska may be really hesitant about getting on a plane and going and playing a football game out in that part of the country, given what went on there this entire time, right? Okay. Rutgers and Maryland are 2 of those teams. I'm also very confident that a 3rd team may shock people. Minnesota is the 3rd team. I am confident, based on conversations I've had, whose administration is very, very hesitant about playing football this fall. Now, this would come right when this program is ascending, coming off its most wins since 1904 or something.
Yep.
PJ Fleck now may have a top 15 recruiting class coming in. This would I mean, this would be an anvil that Roadrunner drops on his own head if they don't play this fall. But they got other issues up there as well with all the racial unrest and the police, and can they bring him in for security? So we're looking at a possible, according to what Michigan is hearing, those 3 schools, and you'd probably just, what would the other 1 or 2 schools be? Illinois is a state that's had a pretty dramatic lockdown this entire time. Could those other 2 schools be Illinois and Northwestern? That I don't know. I'm confident, though, that the 3 I mentioned are 3 of the schools that Michigan is hearing either won't play this fall or are very, very hesitant to. And then we have schools that are working the angle on the other end, where Michigan has heard that one Big Ten West school already has like an entire 12-game supplemental schedule lined up should there be cancellations within the league and not a full season this year. My guess is, and this is an educated one, I'm guessing that school is Nebraska. So your thoughts on those news items here, Aaron?
So I think it's not a surprise at any level about Maryland and Rutgers. It is a bigger surprise, you're right, about Minnesota. But man alive, I mean, that state's governor just asked the president for a disaster declaration. Okay, there's other problems there, other concerns there than the coronavirus. I mean, there's tentacles there. That's for a whole nother show, a whole nother podcast that we can talk about. So I don't think it's all virus related with Minnesota. Here's another angle to this that I don't think we've talked about yet. These television contracts, very, very structured. And the reason Maryland and Rutgers were brought in is so they could get in that DC and that tri-state market. What does that do? What does that do to the television revenue?
That's a good question.
Coming into the Big Ten. And if that takes a hit, why the hell are Rutgers and Maryland even?
Because that's the only reason they're in the league is television markets. Right?
I mean, why are they here? They're not bringing like anything at all to the league other than television revenue. So that's another tentacle to this as well that I don't think is being addressed, and I think absolutely needs to be addressed, because how do you tell a television network, whether that's Fox Sports or the Big Ten Network, of course, how do you tell them, yeah, we're going to have, what would that be, 3 out of 14, we're going to have a 25-30% decrease in the number of games that we have to bring you. And by the way, that local team is not even going to be playing at all this season. That's not going to sit well. They're not just going to pay the same amount of money for fewer games to be broadcast and be able to monetize. So that's another consideration as well. It's helter skelter. Because part of me wants to say, because of that TV contract money, which is going to be really heavily dependent on this year, because you're not going to have nearly as many fans, and you're not going to have going to have the frosting on the cake, if you will.
Yeah.
Part of me really says all of these teams have to have some semblance of a season. They all have to, because they all have to bring in their fair share of money and eyeballs. But the other part of me says it does make sense. I don't think it's logical, but it makes sense that Rutgers and Maryland, they're going to have a difficult time getting anybody scheduled anyway. So I don't know what to make of these developments because of all of the money at stake here.
Well, you just prompted me to consider another angle to your other angle. The Big Ten is a strict across-the-board revenue-sharing league. Mm-hmm. So if you're Iowa, Michigan, Nebraska, Penn State, Ohio State, and you take on all that assumed risk of going out there and playing this fall, and you're the ones generating all this television revenue while a few of these schools sit out, you're just going to sit there and say, oh yeah, I mean, give Rutgers the same share that I get. Give Maryland and Minnesota, if they don't play, give them the same share that I get. I don't know about that. That's another aspect of this that I think has to be ironed out as well, because you took on all that assumed risk, and now you're going to subsidize somebody else with it? I don't know. That is something else to think about. All right. So the next two have to do with the postseason. One of the things that Michigan is also hearing is that the Big Ten is looking at the possibility of doing its own 4-team playoff, but for the Big Ten championship in Indianapolis, where they know the scene very well, obviously, and so they think they can keep 4 teams relatively bubbleized, like you're going to see in the NBA and Major League Baseball, for example. What do you think of the idea of a 4-team Big Ten playoff at the end of the year for the conference championship?
I'm totally fine with that. I think that'd be a lot of fun, actually. And I will admit something.
As a Michigan fan, I'll say this might be the only way we ever get to Indianapolis is if we did it this way.
I will admit, and I will probably get flogged for this. I've just been starved for live sports. When you and Todd is your other employee, when you guys leave for the afternoon and I'm sitting around for our main job, finishing up things in the afternoon or editing this show or editing Michigan podcast, I will have a Premier League soccer game going on in the background.
Aaron.
Sometimes I'll even turn the sound on, and even without the fans, with fan noise pumped in, it's still fun to watch. It's not as much electricity, but it's still fun to watch. All that is to say, I think this would be amazing and fun. And even any season whatsoever, just televise it, pump crowd noise in. It is a hell of a lot better than nothing. All right. So I'm totally down with this. It's not perfect. It's not the way things ought to be, but it's a heck of a lot better than the alternative of having nothing at all. So
I may grant an exception for the affirmative promotion of soccer in my midst, on the grounds that we use the slogan soccer. It's better than nothing. Mm-hmm. if we're using that slogan, I think I will allow that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Finally, on a macro level, Rivals.com's Michigan site, the Wolverine, is hearing that college football conference commissioners are considering playing conference-only schedules all over the country. And then ending the season, so rivalry weekend instead of Thanksgiving weekend would be the first weekend in November, or thereabouts. And then finishing up, no bowl games, so we don't have 50 teams traveling all over the creation to go play in a bowl game. Instead, an FCS-style 8 or 16 team playoff for this season only. All of it done, decided by Christmas before the kids go home for break. And then you sit back and you figure out as we head into the heart of the flu season, where coronavirus is at that particular point in time. So this is the 5th and final way we're going to discuss coronavirus may change and dramatically alter this upcoming college football season. I am very intrigued by this option. I think it would be fascinating to have everything be parochial, and then only have these schools come together to face each other outside of their footprints in the postseason, right? I mean, the allure, the mystery, not really knowing how everybody matches up, I think this one, I'm very attracted to this particular notion. What do you think, Aaron?
If it is indeed a 10 game conference only schedule for basically everybody in college football, every team in college football, then this is an absolute no-brainer, because the teams that make it the furthest or to make it to the championship game, they're going to end up playing about as many games as they would have probably when you take into account 12 games plus the conference championship plus the two-game playoff, if they make it on. So it's not like you're adding a ton of extra wear and tear. So I think this is a no-brainer, and that's basically all. I would love to see a larger playoff anyway. It'd be maybe a good test run for the future as well.
I was beginning to wonder if this is why they're discussing this. We're about halfway through the original contract on the playoff, and we all know this is getting expanded, right?
Yep.
And I think most people have assumed it would get expanded to 6 or 8, and they would keep the conference championship games and everything else. I wonder if this, though, is being considered because this may be a model of something to look forward to in the future, which is, see, the conferences don't want to get rid of the conference championship games because those are huge television paydays that they don't share with the other leagues. And so maybe the compromise will be, instead of a 12-game season, we'll play an 11 or 10-game season. And then every conference still gets to keep its conference championship game. And then we play, maybe it will be a 16-team playoff then. From there, I do wonder if they go down this road, if it's 8 or 16. Here's what this tells me: that at the very least, this is the favorite in the clubhouse for what to do with this when the current contract expires, how it will be extended, right? Because if you're gonna do it this time, you might as well do it with the format that you're the most intrigued by going forward, because then at least you've run it through once. You kind of know how to make it work, right? The logistics of it.
Yep. I'd totally be intrigued. Intrigued is probably an understatement. I would love to see this happen. I mean, I think there's never going to be, I think, in college football, if they expand the playoff to 16 teams, there's never going to be as much carnage as we see in the NCAA basketball tournament.
Yeah.
It's still going to be a heck of a lot of fun to see some of those David versus Goliath
Anytime you got to play an extra game, that the odds get higher, injuries, everything else. Plus, it democratizes the sport. Meaning, hey, if I want to play in the college football playoff and I'm a top 50 recruit right now, there's 4 schools I know I can go to and be a candidate to: Oklahoma, Alabama, Ohio State, and Clemson, right? I'm a candidate to be in this thing every year, right? But if now there's 16 teams that are in this, well, then the pool of teams I may look at going to expands, because I may play earlier at those schools than I do other schools. This is exactly what happened with college basketball. The very first year we expanded to 64 teams in 1985, a number 8 seed in the NCAA tournament, Villanova, won the entire thing. And they beat number 1 seeded Michigan in the second round. They beat number 1 seeded Georgetown in the national championship game. Yep. I mean, and it began the massive parity that we see in college basketball. When you let more teams have a realistic shot to win, then they have realistically more to sell the kinds of players that it takes to go out and win it, right?
Yep.
All right, we'll come back. I think these are fascinating conversations that we just had, and it will be, to use the term du jour this week, it will be intriguing to see how this all finally works itself out here later this month. We'll come back after this with this week's episode of Would You Rather next.
Bigger 10 is brought to you by Michigan Podcast. If you like what you're hearing today and would like to support us, head on over to Patreon, patreon.com/Michigan Podcast, where if you live somewhere where sports wagering is illegal, you can find Steve's picks for various games for just $5 a month. In the process, you can say thank you for creating this podcast on YouTube or via podcast, wherever you listen. Patreon.com/Michigan Podcast.
All right, let's get to it. This week's edition of Would You Rather here on Bigger 10. Aaron, we begin with you. Would you rather play your biggest rival at home this year with barely any fans, or on the road with barely any fans? What's the more advantageous environment, do you think?
I still think it's going to be the home stadium, because you've still got the travel, and it's sounding like, I don't know how you do this. I honestly don't, but it's sounding like as much as possible, teams are looking at busing their players in the day of the game. So unless you have unless you basically eliminate that 11 a.m. Kickoff, I'm not sure how you even do that feasibly. So, but even with that travel, I still think it's an advantage to the home team not to have to go through that on the day of the game. So if that is the case, that being said, I think it's definitely more advantageous to be at home. This one's for you. Would you rather start your summer practice, or whatever they call it, without your quarterback, or end summer practice without an entire defensive unit like secondary, linebackers, defensive line?
I'd rather start without my quarterback. Because I've got 4 weeks to have him come back or figure out who else it is, rather than end it without knowing who I'm going to play on defense. That seems to me, I've got to believe most college programs have at least recruited, particularly at the Big Ten level, not named Rutgers anyway, have recruited at least 2 guys that are functional at the position, right?
Sure.
I think I'd take my chances with that more than not having my entire defense at the end of the end of practice with the season about to start. Aaron, would you rather let Notre Dame schedule as many Big Ten teams as they need to this fall? Because that's another thing that's being discussed. Or tell the Irish, hey, to hell with Notre Dame. We're asked twice to join the league. You turn us down, you're on your own. What do you prefer?
So generally, I'm with you with the to hell to Notre Dame thing. I think if you want to have all the accoutrements of being in the Big Ten, then you need to join the Big Ten. But I think circumstances being what they are this year, I'm good for a 1-year papal dispensation, if you will.
Well played.
So I'm good with them scheduling as many Big Ten teams as they need to this year.
But I bet that better means then we better at least get one mea culpa, maximum mea culpa from Notre Dame. Indeed.
Exactly. Last one for you. Would you rather make it or make this college football playoff if it means not making it again for another decade, or would you rather be close but no cigar every season?
This one's tough because Michigan's been close a couple of times. We were one play away from making it in 2016. We were one game away from making it in 2018, and it's excruciating not making it. On the other hand, you make it once, and then you kind of become an afterthought. You're kind of where Michigan State's program is, right? You made it 5 years ago, and where has that program been ever since? I guess because there's 11 other games on the schedule, I'd rather be close but no cigar, because in all of those other games, there's going to be something meaningful that you've accomplished, right? Plus, it's possible you win a Big Ten championship and don't make the playoff. That happened to Ohio State just a couple of years ago. Remember, back in 2018, happened to Penn State in 2016. So you can still have something meaningful happen to you if you don't make the college football playoff. All right, we'll come back with this week's Twitter poll results and question of the week next. This week's Twitter poll results, we asked you, do you think all 14 Big Ten teams will play college football this fall? 56% of you said no. 44% said yes. Aaron, what do you think? Where would you vote?
Yeah, if I were setting a betting line on this based on what I've seen in the general, again, just the general determination for there to be no season at all, I would put no at like minus 190 or something like that, where the VIG is so much that it's, you know.
You think no is a solid favorite. Yeah. Somebody's not playing, at least in our league. At least
exactly. Yes would be like plus 110 or plus one or even money, something like that. So that's where I'm basically with the audience here.
This week's question of the week comes from Aaron McCullough. If Rutgers doesn't play football this fall, will it matter? Would you call what they've been doing the past few years football anyway?
Well played.
I asked and answered, Your Honor. I almost feel like that question came with its own answer, right? So, sorry, Coach Schiano. That's going to do it for this week's edition of Bigger 10. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter to keep updated about what we think about all things Big 10 and more. At Bigger 10 is how you can follow us on Twitter. At Bigger 10. Also, don't forget, if you listen to the podcast version, thank you. Please like us with a 5-star review if you haven't done that already, and give us a subscribe as well. You can also like this video and subscribe right here on our YouTube page and share it with all other Big 10 fans that you know. We would appreciate that. Until the next time, this is Bigger 10.